Novak Djokovic just said something about Eala that made everyone in the tennis world stop what they were doing and pay serious attention. The greatest player of all time, the man with more Grand Slam titles than anyone in history, doesn't hand out compliments casually or throw around words like superstar without meaning them. So when he called Eala exactly that during a press conference at the Australian Open, that wasn't just nice words or polite commentary. That was a stamp of approval from the GOAT himself that could fundamentally change the entire trajectory of her career and her place in the sport. This is the kind of endorsement that opens doors, that legitimizes hype, that transforms a promising young player into someone the entire tennis establishment has to take seriously. Let me break down what Djokovic actually said, why it matters way more than you might think, and what this means for the future of Eala and tennis as a whole. Before we dive deep into this, drop a comment right now and tell me honestly, had you even heard of Eala before this whole situation blew up? Or are you just finding out about her now because of all the chaos and attention? I want to know where you're coming from. Alright, so here's exactly what happened, and the context matters enormously. Novak Djokovic was doing a routine press conference at the Australian Open, which is standard procedure for top players during Grand Slam tournaments. A reporter asked him about the evolution of the Australian Open over the 20-plus years he's been competing in Melbourne. This was a pretty standard, straightforward question. They wanted to know what he thought about the massive crowds the tournament now attracts, the corporate sponsorships that are everywhere you look, and the complaints from some people that the event has gotten too commercial and overcrowded compared to the more intimate atmosphere it had decades ago. Most players, when asked something like this, would give some completely bland, media-trained answer about how it's great to see tennis growing or how they appreciate all the fans who come out to support the sport. Generic stuff that sounds nice but doesn't actually say anything meaningful. But Novak Djokovic took the question in a completely different and far more interesting direction. He said that complaining about overflowing crowds is actually a luxury problem, the kind of issue that every tournament organizer in the world dreams of having. He pointed out that selling out tickets and shattering attendance records is exactly what you want to see. Then he threw in this absolutely brilliant line. There are far worse nightmares for a tournament to face than having too many passionate fans who want to be there. That's classic Djokovic right there. The man has been around professional tennis long enough to remember when the Australian Open was genuinely scraping by, when it was borrowing space from a local football club just so players had somewhere to warm up properly. He specifically mentioned using a gym across the street that belonged to some Australian rules football team. He actually messed up the name at first, said Essendon, then quickly corrected himself to Collingwood and apologized to fans because apparently that football rivalry is extremely serious business in Australia and you don't want to mix those teams up. The point he was making is genuinely important. The Australian Open has transformed dramatically from a tournament that was struggling financially and borrowing facilities to a massive global event with indoor practice arenas, world-class recovery centers, and five-star everything. That evolution, that growth and commercialization, isn't a betrayal of what tennis used to be or some sellout of the sport's soul. It's proof that tennis is winning, that it's attracting more attention and investment than ever before, that it's successfully growing its global footprint. But then Djokovic pivoted to Eala, and this is where things got really interesting and significant. He brought up what happened with her match being scheduled on a tiny outer court and how literally thousands of people showed up trying to get in to watch her play. He said it's been the talk of the locker room among players, and rightfully so because the situation was genuinely chaotic. Security barriers were getting pushed to their absolute limits. The logistics completely collapsed. People were being turned away. It was absolute chaos for what was supposed to be a routine early round match. Now here's the key part that you need to understand. Djokovic didn't frame the situation as a disaster or a massive failure by the tournament organizers. He didn't criticize the Australian Open for screwing up or being incompetent. Instead, he framed it as evidence of something much bigger happening in tennis, something the sport needs to recognize and adapt to. He acknowledged that they probably should have anticipated the overwhelming response and scheduled her on a bigger court that could accommodate the demand. But the real story, the thing that actually matters, is why so many people showed up in the first place. Eala represents an entire nation. The Philippines has over 110 million people, and they've never had a tennis player capture global attention and achieve success at this level before. When Novak Djokovic calls her a superstar, that's not some throwaway compliment or polite encouragement for a young player. That's the greatest player in tennis history, the man who's won more Grand Slam titles than anyone, recognizing that Eala has transcended being just another promising young player with potential. She's become a genuine cultural phenomenon. The weight she's carrying on her shoulders isn't just about her world ranking or her match results. It's about representing an entire country of over 100 million people who see her as their ambassador on the world's biggest sporting stages. This is where some sarcasm kicks in because let's be completely real here. The Australian Open organizers absolutely, undeniably dropped the ball on this one. They scheduled a player who has the passionate backing of 110 million people on a court that holds maybe a few hundred spectators at most. What exactly did they think was going to happen? That everyone would just politely watch on their phones from home and not try to actually see their national hero play in person? The fact that this became such a massive logistical issue shows how fundamentally out of touch tournament organizers can be with the rapidly changing demographics of tennis fandom. They're still operating under the outdated assumption that the only players who draw massive crowds are the established Western stars from traditional tennis powerhouses. But the sport is globalizing faster than the infrastructure and the establishment mindset can keep up with, and Eala is absolute proof of that reality. Djokovic made this point really effectively when he talked about finding the sweet spot between managing crowds properly and maintaining a good experience for everyone. He saw what happened with Eala's match and recognized it immediately as a preview of what's coming for tennis. Fresh territories and markets. Absolutely ravenous fan bases. And complete chaos when those passionate fan bases show up in massive numbers. The old model of scheduling matches and assigning courts doesn't remotely account for the kind of cultural phenomenon that Eala represents. What's genuinely wild about this entire situation is that Eala's rise to this level of fame and attention happened almost instantly. Normally in tennis, the sport likes to slow cook its stars over many years. You grind on the tour for years, you slowly move up the rankings through consistent results, you gradually build a following over time. But with Eala, it's been like flipping a switch. One moment she's a promising junior player that hardcore tennis fans might know about, and the next moment she's got an entire nation of over 100 million people tracking her every move and showing up in absolutely massive numbers to watch her play. This creates a really interesting and challenging dynamic because the sport's infrastructure genuinely wasn't built for this kind of sudden global celebrity. Court bookings, television time slots, media obligations, promotional schedules, all of that is still fundamentally designed around the traditional, gradual path to tennis stardom. When someone jumps the line because of cultural and national significance rather than world ranking points and tournament titles, it causes friction and genuine confusion among tournament organizers and tennis officials. That's exactly why Novak Djokovic's comments matter so tremendously. He's been through this himself. He knows exactly what it's like to carry the hopes and dreams of an entire country on your shoulders. Serbia isn't the Philippines in terms of population size, but the pressure and expectations are remarkably similar. When Djokovic talks about celebrity being a golden prison, about the burdens that come with representing your nation, he's speaking from deep personal experience. The same wave of adoration and support that lifts you up and carries you forward can absolutely drown you if you're not properly prepared for it mentally and emotionally. For a teenager like Eala, who's still learning how to compete consistently at the professional level, that pressure is absolutely enormous. She's not just trying to win matches and improve her world ranking like other young players. She's managing the expectations of millions of people who see her success as their success, who've invested emotionally in her journey, who desperately want to see her succeed on the biggest stages. That's a completely different level of mental and emotional burden than what most young players deal with as they develop their careers. The mob scene at her match wasn't just random fans being excited about tennis. Those were true believers who in many cases crossed oceans, who fought through massive crowds, who were desperate to see their icon compete in person. They weren't necessarily there for the tennis itself. They were there for what she represents. that transforms what should be a standard early round match into a genuine spectacle that outshines whatever's happening on the main showcase courts with higher-ranked players. Djokovic recognized this dynamic immediately, and instead of criticizing the chaos or complaining about the disruption, he celebrated it. He said these frenzies are inevitable when the sport outgrows its existing infrastructure. The first week of a Grand Slam tournament is always somewhat chaotic with incredibly tight schedules and competing storylines, but the rise of players like Eala shows just how complex the puzzle has become. Fan engagement isn't just about rankings and trophies anymore. It's fundamentally about cultural weight and national pride. When the greatest player in tennis history publicly backs a young player like this, it accomplishes two critically important things. First, it legitimizes all the hype and attention surrounding her. People can dismiss fan excitement as irrational nationalism or whatever dismissive label they want to use, but when Novak Djokovic calls you a superstar, that's validation from someone who knows exactly what it takes to operate at the absolute highest level. Second, it protects her from some of the inevitable criticism and scrutiny that comes with this kind of sudden fame and attention. There are always going to be cynical people who say the attention is undeserved or premature, that she hasn't won enough titles yet to justify the massive hype. But Djokovic's endorsement shuts that criticism down. He's essentially saying the hype is real, it's justified, and the tennis world better adjust to this new reality because it's not going away. Djokovic's broader point about preferring overcrowded stadiums to empty ones is something tournament organizers genuinely need to internalize. The absolute worst thing that can happen to any sport is apathy. If people don't care enough to show up, if they're not invested emotionally, you're dead in the water as a sport. The fact that thousands of people are fighting to get into a side court to watch a young player from the Philippines is exactly the kind of problem you want to have. It means tennis is successfully breaking into new markets and capturing the imagination of people who never cared about the sport before. That's how you build genuine long-term growth and sustainability. The elephant in the room is whether the tennis establishment is actually prepared to handle this new era. The sport has been dominated by players from a relatively small group of traditional tennis countries for decades. Now you've got rising stars from places like the Philippines who bring absolutely massive fan bases that don't fit the traditional model at all. Are tournaments going to adapt their thinking and their infrastructure, or are they going to keep scheduling these players on outer courts and acting surprised when chaos inevitably ensues? So there you have it. Novak Djokovic didn't just compliment Eala. He basically anointed her as representing the future of tennis and called out the establishment for not being ready to handle what's coming. The chaos at her match wasn't a bug in the system. It was a feature showing that the sport is growing in ways nobody anticipated. If you think tennis is about to get way more interesting with players like Eala breaking through barriers, smash that like button right now and hit subscribe. Drop your thoughts in the comments about whether she can live up to this incredible